All right, so I just want to tell you the goal of my presentation today is really to share with you some actions that Sodexo is taking around the area of waste so you can decide if you want to take some of those actionable steps as well. But let me briefly introduce you to Sodexo. It's not necessarily a household name. Sodexo is a leader in sustainable integrated facilities and food service operations. It's my job to ensure that our 125,000 employees and 9,000 sites with 7 client segments in North America have the education, tools, and resources they need to implement Sodexo's sustainability practices. For example, we provide food services at hospitals, governments, agencies, schools, universities, and ballparks. So I can share some perspective about implementing practices at one site, many sites, various stakeholders such as cities and states. The Better Tomorrow plan is Sodexo's strategic plan. It's our roadmap for sustainability. We have 18 commitments focused on 4 priorities, including our commitment to our employees, nutrition, local communities, and the environment. And in this environment pillar today, we get to talk about food waste, which is why we're all here. So thank you for that. And you've seen this from Laura, you've seen this from Jim, and what I want to start with you, get you to think about, though, is think about this EPA food waste hierarchy in everything you do. We'll focus on the top, we'll go down this funnel, and this is an important consideration because many people automatically drop down to composting as the go-to solution, and there are really multiple options before you should even start to consider composting. So let's start with source reduction, and Jim touched on this some. But the ability to reduce waste before it ever enters your kitchen or your location is really extremely important. So I urge you to look at source reduction first, has a higher environmental, social, and financial impact. And preventing food waste in the first place will conserve those resources like water and petroleum. And again, you won't have to deal with how to handle those waste items. A true comprehensive waste program has multiple practices in place for your consideration. So if you believe you have no waste, I really think that you should track your waste first for a set period of time, and you'll be surprised by your results. We have some excellent colleges and universities that have some of the best waste reduction practices in the country, and they've identified huge savings. So I know even if you don't think you have food waste, you do and should take a look at some of your practices. Some great public resources for assessments, paper tracking, and food waste tracking are the Food Waste Reduction Alliance that Laura already mentioned, LeanTap, and but I really want to make sure too you utilize the resources with the USDA and the EPA online as well as the NRA Conserve. Great sites that are publicly available for some of these practices. Next on the hierarchy is feeding hungry people and animals. Sodexo has an entire foundation whose sole goal is to stop hunger, and that's the core of our culture. But with Jim and Eric here, we're going to let you focus on those conversations, and I want to talk a little bit about feeding animals. So you can reach out to farmers at farmers markets or vendor partners and see if they're looking for feed stocks for animals, and the most common are pigs and chickens. In some of our healthcare sites, we have one employee that was taking home the vegetable trim waste from the kitchens to her chickens in her backyard. And I think it's really cool because one of the unintentional circumstances that happened was as customers and other employees learned about this backyard chicken program, they also started their own. So sometimes you get unanticipated results that are really awesome. For industrial uses, I want to highlight utilizing your fats, oils, and greases for the production of biofuel. Gone are the days when you're paying for those materials to be removed. Now businesses provide a small fee back to you for allowing them to capture your fogs, fat, oils, and greases, because they're a resource, and we want to make sure that you capture that. So these resources for getting reimbursed for biofuels are available. You can find it through a simple web search. You can also check with your food service distributor for some of those resources as well. The last area I'll focus on is composting and landfill. I lump these two together because ultimately we want to reduce waste before we get to having to look at compost and landfill. I found a lot of times it's very common for customers and employees to feel like it's okay to not be as diligent about controlling waste if you're composting because they feel good about that solution. So make sure you stay on top of that. Education is key. There are multiple options for equipment that you can purchase to pull food waste. Some composters like that. It helps break down the food into smaller pieces. It allows for quicker composting and processing of that compost. The hydration is also a way to reduce the volume of waste. You can lower your tipping fees and lower your waste bills. But remember, if you're sending your food waste down the garbage disposal, although it's not going to the landfill, it's still being dealt with in water treatment plants. So again, it's important to reduce that waste. A resource to highlight to find some available composting in your area is findacomposter.com, and that's on the way to being updated. So those are a couple resources there. If controlling your waste stream isn't important yet, you should really think about this. States and cities are beginning to ban food waste and other items from landfills. So it's going to be a requirement. It's good for you to get proactive and consider the practices now that best work for your operation. Just a few last tips. Make sure that you and your management team support the programs you put in place. You're in the kitchen. Ask your team about waste practices. Engage with them. That makes sure they know that you care, and they should too. And everyone has different circumstances in your restaurant. Make sure that you choose the practices and infrastructure that work for you. And I urge you to consider some of these actions in the presentation and start to think about what works for you. Thanks so much.